we have to talk about Dana White. We have to talk about Dana White. And so I have to be honest with you guys. This one has been a bit of a struggle for me mentally. And if you recall, I said when the Patty Pimblett, Dana White interview powwow thingy came out, I said on this show, boy, am I happy it came out on a Wednesday because I was able to respond to it right away. Truth be told, I was happy that we didn't have a show the following day after this came out or the following few hours because my feelings on how to talk about this, whether to talk about it, how to address it, continue to change. But I've landed on a spot, obviously, because I'm here and I'm going to talk about it. In case you don't know, in case you've been away or living under a rock, here are the actual facts. On Monday night, January 2nd, at 7:24 p.m. Pacific time, Eastern time, 4:24 Pacific time, TMZ posted an article with the headline, Dana White, nightclub fight with wife on New Year's Eve. Dana says, quote, there's no excuse. There's a minute or so video of an altercation, if you want to put it that way, between Dana White and his wife, and who has been largely in the shadows throughout his tenure as UFC president. Don't hear much from her, don't see her much, if at all, over the past 20 or so years. But in the video, you see them at a club and you see them talking very briefly. Then you see first his wife slap him. Then you see he retaliates and slaps her once. It's unclear what happens next. It looks like a second slap. It looks like some holding. But what we know for sure is there's 1,000% a slap from his wife, and then he slaps her back, and then there's like a little bit of a brouhaha, and then the clip ends. So we're not really quite sure what happens afterwards. But it's clear as day what happens before that. It's a shocking video, and it's a disturbing video, and it's quite frankly an embarrassing video, right? No one wants to be caught on camera doing anything anywhere near that. What was so interesting about the TMZ thing was it comes out Monday night. You know, we've talked about timing of stories coming out. The classic Friday night news drop. We talked about that with the Krause story. There's a massive football game about to be played. There's the Rose Bowl. Is that all? This happened New Year's Eve, they said, so it's a day and a half later. Is this all happening? Is this all getting dropped at this time so it gets buried? Who knows? But what was so interesting about it was, excuse me, you get the video, and usually how these things are, you get the video and maybe you say reach out for comment, but there's nothing really immediate. It's followed by just a few graphs down, an actual interview with Dana White. And that's followed by a statement from his wife. This is not common, but hey, they did their journalistic duty and they got this footage and they reached out for comment, and there's nothing actually wrong with that. And so then you watch the video and you read the statement, and it's still up, obviously. And if I'm being 100% honest, I actually think that if you scrap out all the questions and the back and forth, I actually think Dana handled it as best as he could. He didn't offer any excuses. He didn't blame X, Y, and Z. He said, I'm going to have to deal with this. I'm going to have to deal with the comments. I've been one who has said in the past, this is a tough thing to come back from. I actually thought that he owned up to it. Now, most people don't get that benefit. They don't get the benefit of getting a chance to own up to it right away so that the headlines then become Dana White apologizes, as opposed to Dana White and wife get into fight. Dana White slaps wife after she slaps him. Anything of that sort, the headlines then became Dana White apologizes, which to me wasn't the news. The news was what happened in the clip. All right, fair enough. What was embarrassing about the interview, excuse me. What was embarrassing about the interview was the way TMZ handled it. Now, we know TMZ and Dana White are in cahoots, and I've talked about TMZ on this show before, but Harvey and the other guy sitting there and being, oh, Dana, we hear that this is a place where alcohol flows. And Dana, do you even remember anything? They were offering him softballs. They were offering him outs, and he actually wasn't taking them. So actually, I'd say kudos to him on that regard. Kudos to him for not taking the outs that they were offering. Their behavior in that interview, to me, was quite frankly embarrassing. They were trying to say, hey, Dana, we're going to put this out. We're going to give you a chance to respond. We're going to treat you very, 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 very nicely with kid gloves, and you're going to come out looking and smelling like roses. The truth is, in that interview, in that clip, he said what he had to say, and I think he did a good job of not making excuses and owning up to it. Those two guys, to me, were embarrassing. They were trying so hard to help him and to offer him these layups that they embarrassed themselves. All right, so he says that he does the interview, and then the story, is kind of sitting at a, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's kind of sitting at a 3 or 4. It feels like it might be rising a little bit now. Obviously, what happened Monday night in the football game dominated the headlines. But now it feels like something's happening. And a lot of people have been asking me my thoughts on this. A lot of shows have been asking me to come on. And as I said, this has been a tough one for me. And I don't, even up until this very second, am not quite sure what I'm going to say. Because I can't hide from the fact that my relationship with Dana White, or lack thereof, is extremely personal. And it's largely personal, I would argue, because of him. He has made it very personal. He has crossed the line multiple times. Now, I cover him, and I cover his business, and I cover his organization, but I've never talked about him the way he has talked about me. And I hope that you can now understand, people. I hope that you can now understand why it is so surreal for me, why it is so mind-blowing for me to hear a person like that, like him, talk about me the way in which he spoke about me in front of Patty Pimblett, with the words that he used, the insults that he used, the disrespect in the words, how insulting they were, how mind-blowing it is for someone like me who tries to live a good life, who tries to be a good person, who tries to be the best human being, husband, father, citizen that he could be, to hear someone like that speak about me the way in which he speaks about me. Do you know how fucking crazy that is? Do you know how fucking crazy it is to hear a person with his morals, with his ethics, talk about me like that? And what I said to some people after hearing that back in December was, it's actually reassuring. Because when you call someone a piece of shit, when you call someone a low-life scumbag, when you call someone those names, that means that you believe they are essentially the complete opposite of you. Right? Because no one thinks that they are a piece of shit, a lowlife, a scumbag, all that stuff. No one thinks that of themselves, right? Usually, if you're a normal human being. When you call someone that, you say they are basically the opposite. They do things, they behave, they are the extreme opposite of me. And so if Dana White thinks that of me, I actually feel like I'm in a pretty good spot. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, like, 2 negatives equal a positive. You get what I'm trying to say? And so that is reassuring. He thinks that of me. That means I'm doing things right. And then you see this video, and then you see him striking a woman who is his wife, who is the mother of his children. And you start to think to yourself, like, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to talk about this? Because this is personal. He has made it personal. I've tried to repeatedly, take the high road and not make it personal. But I can't not talk about this. I can't not weigh in on this. Because if this was John Jones, if this was Conor McGregor, if this was Amanda Nunes, if this was Rose, if this was any fighter in MMA on the UFC roster, we would talk about it. Just as we've talked about John Jones and Conor McGregor and other people who have had ugly moments. We've talked about them. So why would we shy away from this one? I'll be honest. I even had my family members say, like, don't talk about it. Take the high road. Take a pass on this one. And then I thought to myself initially, yeah, maybe they're right. It's family business, right? It's family business. But then I thought to myself, this is not a private matter. This is a public matter because it happened in the public sphere and it's on camera, and he spoke about it on camera in an interview on the record. And he's the most powerful and most famous person in the sport, and he is the face of the sport. And so I do have to talk about it, and I will talk about it. And so my thoughts on the video and the incident and the aftermath are as follows. First of all, I can't believe that there are people online that are actually defending Dana White's actions. I can't believe that there are fans, fighters, pundits, if you want to call that, defending Dana White. And guess what? If you don't see them, you're not looking hard enough because they're there. Defending Dana White's actions and saying that because he was slapped first, it's all good. All's fair. Equal rights. Excuse me, where I come from, you get slapped by a woman 10 times, you walk away. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if that to you feels like I don't believe in equal rights, then fine. Because to me, equal rights is treating women fairly, treating women like we want to be treated. Women get paid the same, get the same opportunities. That's equal rights. You chauvinistic pigs, that's equal rights. Striking a woman, who, by the way, is not just any random woman, because you got struck first, no, that's not how this goes. And anyone who is saying that, shame on you. It is completely, absolutely embarrassing that anyone is defending this. And you know what's even more embarrassing about it all? He's not even defending it. He's not even defending his actions. He's not even offering excuses. But you have fighters rushing to Twitter, rushing to social media to defend striking a woman, to defend striking a woman, to defend striking your spouse. What? What kind of fucking crazy world are we living in? What kind of crazy fucking sport is this? In what universe is this okay? It's not okay. And guess who believes it's not okay? The guy that you are defending. The guy that you are defending. Dana White, there's a lot of material, and I could have done the whole song and dance where we offered receipts. I could have done that where I played the clips. I could have done the whole thing. I'm not going to do that because I do want to tread lightly here because this is somewhat personal. But here's the bottom line. 2014, Dana White is talking about a domestic violence situation involving Ray Rice, the former Baltimore Raven. He was asked how he would handle this situation. He said, quote, "We've been human beings and letting these guys, other guys, make up for what they've done and come back. There's one thing that you never bounce back from, and that's putting your hands on a woman. Been that way in the UFC since we started here. You don't bounce back from putting your hands on a woman." End quote. He said that. That's his quote. It's on camera. You can find it. And so my question to all of you is, why does he get to bounce back? Why does he get to bounce back? He said it himself. You don't bounce back from hitting a woman, from putting your hands on a woman. And let's be honest, they have let other people bounce back since then. Most notably, John Jones, who was involved in his own domestic violence situation in September of 2020. And now we're talking about him fighting in a big fight. And there are so many others. Abel Trujillo, the late Anthony Johnson, Luis Pena. Now, usually what happens in the UFC when it comes to these issues, depending on where you are in the pecking order, if you're below, a certain line, you will get released, you will be reprimanded. If you're at a certain level, you'll usually get, you'll get away with it, scot-free. If Endeavor, if the UFC, if they do nothing here, and let me be clear, as I've said before, I am not a fan of cancel culture. I'm not a fan of, you make one mistake or something like that, whatever you want to call it, and you're done for life. You're erased from history. But I am a fan of accountability. I am a fan of, having to pay for your actions. Just because you're not a fan of cancel culture doesn't mean you're not a fan of accountability. Like, there has to be some repercussions. I'm a fan of that. What kind of message are you sending the fighters on your roster, the employees who work for you, if you can be caught on camera striking a woman which again, I believe full stop, it doesn't matter if you got struck 10 times. You don't strike a woman. That's just the way I believe. That's the way I was brought up. Those are my values. What kind of message are you sending to your fighters, to your employees, if that goes unpunished? If that goes away without any repercussion? What kind of message is that? Because I can assure you it will happen. It happens in other sports. It's happened in boxing very, very recently. Look up Gervonta Davis. What happens then when the next guy does something or gal does something, and now you are being faced with a situation where you have to punish them? What happens then? If you got away with it, how could you punish them? Now you're just a hypocrite if you don't do anything. All that being said, asking me right now, face to face, mano a mano, do I believe something's going to happen? The answer is no. I do not believe anything is going to happen. Endeavor has been silent. Reporters have asked the UFC for a comment on this. They have said, I shit you not, refer to the TMZ article. This is a major league sports organization telling reporters to refer to a TMZ article for further comment on the president of the company involved in something like this. Are you kidding me? I mean, you want another indication of where we sit, of who we are? Refer to a TMZ article? Really? That's the response? So no, I don't think that anything is going to happen. I would be shocked if something did happen. This is going to get, quietly swept under the rug, and it'll be business as usual. Now, I've seen some media people write about this. I would urge you to read the majority of them. I thought Jed Meshew of MMA Fighting put out a great article earlier this morning, an honest and fair article earlier this morning, and I would urge you to read that. I saw Kevin Ioli's article of Yahoo Sports. We know Kevin's relationship. We know who he is as a reporter. He suggested that Dana go away for a month. Let me ask you something. If Dana went away for a month, would anyone notice? Would anyone notice? No, no one would notice. What is that? That's a cop-out. That's you just saying, hey, everyone, here I am being this, real, tough guy. I'm going to stand up for what's right, but I'm really going to give my guy a pass. No. Either you're going to stand up for what's right or you're going to give him a pass. You can't do both, all right? You can't do both. If Dana White went away for a month, no one would notice. What? He wouldn't show up to the press conference in Brazil? Chances are he wasn't going to that fight anyway. He doesn't go to those who cares? That's the repercussion? No, you have to tell your employees, your fighters, that this type of stuff doesn't fly. And it's not just about being like, yo, mea culpa, I messed up. We were married for 30 years. It's all good in the hood. No, that to me isn't enough. That to me isn't enough. If you want to know, and I'll never, ever, 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 ever get over this. If you want to know what Dana White and the UFC truly think about domestic violence, look no further than January of 2019, the very first show on ESPN. Look no further than that show. Still to this day, I can't believe, and I bet there are new fans who don't even know that this happened. Greg Hardy, with his past, with his resume, with his rap sheet, with his history of domestic violence, Greg Hardy was put on the first ESPN card. That alone was shocking to me. Brooklyn, New York, Barclays Center, the big debut on ESPN Plus and ESPN National, massive. That alone was shocking to me, that they would put Greg Hardy, of all people, who had no business being in the UFC, let alone fighting on the first ESPN card in such a massive moment in the history of the sport. That alone was shocking. But you know what was even more freaking shocking? And you know what said it all about how they feel about these sorts of things, is that they put him on the same card as Rachel Ostovich, who some 3, 4, 5 weeks earlier, less than that, was involved in her own domestic violence situation. She was the victim. She was the victim of a domestic violence situation. And they put her, this poor young woman who had to overcome that, who I spoke to a couple of weeks later, who was dealing with a lot of trauma, on the same freaking card as Greg Hardy. That alone should tell you what they think of domestic violence and how tone deaf. And I used that same word on my one and only appearance on First Take in January of 2019. And I said, as an ESPN employee, knowing very well that this might cost me, I said this was a tone deaf decision by everyone involved. ESPN should have stepped in. UFC should have never made it happen. Some adult in the room should have said, you know what? Maybe we should put Greg Hardy on the card in 2 weeks. Maybe we should separate these two. Maybe we shouldn't put the guy with his rap sheet on the same card as the person who was just assaulted by a loved one a few weeks ago. Maybe that's not the best look for the cage fighting organization. And I said it, and I got blasted by Dana on TMZ, and I was told to keep my mouth shut, and I was told to take the high road. As I've said before, Ariel Helwani, dead. Don't have to worry about that anymore. Thank the high heavens, because you can imagine what we would be doing now if it was me working over there during these times. Look at that. Look at the way it's been covered. Go look. And compare that, by the way, to the way other domestic violence situations have been covered by the mainstream, by them, by people that I respect. But this is what they expect from us. This is what they expect from MMA, from cage fighting, from the UFC, from Dana White. We are not held to the same standard. You see, that's the thing. They talk about all these things about other owners, about boxing, about promoters, and they always hold the UFC and Dana White to a different standard because we're the fun thing on Saturday night that you do with your friends, that you bet and you gamble and you eat your pizza and your wings and you drink your beer, and then you go to the real stuff on Sunday and then Monday, and we're kind of like the Vice on the side. So we don't get, the same type of criticism because they don't actually think that highly of the sport and the particulars and the players in the sport. And so it's not going to dominate until it becomes a really, 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 really big thing. But just look at the coverage today, because I saw the coverage today and it was all, kid gloves and this and that. I can guarantee you if this was someone in his position in any other sport, in any other league, and I hate the comparison to the commissioner because he ain't a commissioner, he's an owner. I can guarantee you if it was any other sports owner, any other executive, he would be raked over the coals. It would be completely different. You don't need me to tell you that. But that's the way they view the sport. That's the way they view the organization. That's the way they view him. The outrage isn't going to be the same if it's expected. And when I say expected, I don't mean, we expect this guy to be someone who hits his wife. We just don't hold him in the same regard. We just don't hold him to that same high standard. He's the fight promoter guy. This is the crazy cage fighting sport. It's okay. Guess what? It's not okay because we treat this like a real sport. We treat this like they treat the NFL. We treat this like they treat the NBA, MLB. This is not okay. It's not. And it's not okay for the UFC to be silent about it, and it's not okay for Endeavor to be silent about it, and it's not okay for the fighters to be defending it. None of it is okay. This behavior is not okay. And it doesn't matter if it was someone who is fighting for 10 and 10 or an executive at the very top, because I could guarantee you if it was me, I'd be done. And I can guarantee you if it was me, the things that he would be saying about me would be a hell of a lot less diplomatic than what I'm saying about him right now. Because as I told you back in December, all the things that he says about me, times 10. Times 10. But I'll bite my tongue for a little longer. I hope you recognize just how tough it is to hear someone like that speak of me like that, the way in which he does, knowing that's who he is. And I'm reminded of the same quote that I used during the early days of the pandemic about the organization, about him, and I had to dance around it, considering who I was working for. I'm reminded of the late, great Dennis Green, who once said about the Chicago Bears when he was the coach of the Arizona Cardinals, they are who we thought they were. He is who we thought he was. He is who I know who he is. I hope you understand now, because I said it back then, and I'll say it again. He is who I know he is. Y'all could keep defending him. Y'all can keep defending him. You could keep defending the actions. You could keep defending the way that they treat fighters. You could keep doing that. And I'll still be here talking about the sport, and I love the sport, and I love the fighters. I can't believe that you are defending this. Shame on all of you who are defending this. Shame on every single one of you. Shame on every single fighter who's defending this. Shame on TBS if they're going to air that slap fighting league. And last I checked, you click on the link, it doesn't even go to anything anymore. So who the hell knows? Can you script it any worse? Shame on TBS if that's what you're going to do. Shame on TBS if you're going to air a slap fighting league, and shame on anyone who picks it up afterwards. After that, really? And they've stayed quiet as well. Shame on anyone who's covering that, honestly. Shame on all of you. That's not sport. Shame on Nevada for sanctioning that. Nevada, who doesn't sanction BKFC, they sanction that? You're kidding me? No defense? Shame on the fighters that have to take part in it. Shame on all of them. Alcohol flowed. Do you remember anything from that night? Shame on everyone. Shame on everyone for just letting this slide, because you wouldn't let it slide if it was someone else. And so I don't know what is going to happen. I'm not even advocating for anything. Again, there needs to be repercussions. There needs to be accountability. I don't think there will be. Prove me wrong. Color me surprised. I don't know. I don't know what is going to happen. But to me, if you want to know my stance on it, you don't touch a woman. You don't touch the mother of your kids. You don't touch your wife. You don't touch anyone. You walk away, and there's no excuse. Even though they tried to offer him excuses, there are absolutely no excuses. And as he said, you don't bounce back. And I agree. It's pretty freaking hard to bounce back. I remember Chris Albrecht, head of HBO, who didn't bounce back when he got into an altercation with his girlfriend, I believe it was, when they were in Las Vegas for a fight, and that actually wrecked the HBO UFC deal. He didn't bounce back from that. I saw Dana White talking recently about John Skipper and how he got, blackmailed for his cocaine use. He lost his job. He had to walk away. There are repercussions. What are the repercussions here? Where's the accountability? Why the silence? That's what I want to know. Why the silence? And so I'll say one last thing on all of this, and then we could put all of this to bed and we could get to the awards. As I said, it's been way too personal. And it has reached levels that I never thought in a million years that it would reach. And I've debated in my mind over the last few days if I go to a certain place, and I'm not going to go to a certain place. I'm not going to go to a certain place because this ultimately isn't about me, and I don't want it to be about me, but it needs to be about the sport. It needs to be about who is leading this sport and who is involved in this sport and the way in which people view the sport. And so I'm not going to go to a certain place. But I will say this. Of all the things that Dana White has said about me, all the lies, all the insults, all the bullshit, all the nonsense, all the mean, vitriolic, disgusting things that he has said about me, for what? Side note, for what? For breaking some news? For getting it right? For not kissing his ass? For not cupping his balls? For what? Of all the things that he has said, there has only been one. There has only been one that has stuck with me, that hurt me right here, that made me think a certain way, that was like a spear in the heart. There has only been one that has stayed with me, that I can hear it in my brain. And that was back in 2016. That was back after the UFC 199 incident. That was a couple days after the unbanning. And Dana was on UFC Filtered with Norton and Sarah, and he was talking about this whole thing, and he was saying that I was, throwing a pity party for myself, and they were making fun of me, and he was talking about how I was a scumbag and a this and a that, and making and perpetuating these lies. And in the interview, which I'm not going to play, he was making fun of the fact that when I spoke about it on this show in a different studio, I got very emotional. And this is the one thing that when I saw it and when I heard it, I was like, fucking hell, I can't believe he went there. I can't believe he went to this level. I can't believe he stooped so low. Because again, you don't like me as a journalist, you don't like me as a host, you don't like me as a newsbreaker, fine. But you don't go to a certain level. That's what I've always believed. And that's what I've always tried to hold on to, no matter what, even though so many others have tried to make it personal. And in the interview with those guys, if you want to call it an interview, they were talking about me crying, and he said something to the effect of like that I look like a wuss, and your kids are going to see that. Your kids are going to see that one day. And how embarrassed they would be by seeing their father cry, by seeing their father get emotional after he was just, verbally assaulted, after other shit has happened, after he was told his career was over, after he was told that there was a bullet in his head, that he was done. Your kids are going to see that. And I could not believe that he would go to that level, that he would talk about my family. That has stuck with me since 2016. That has always remained with me. That's the kind of person that he is. You don't talk about people's families. You don't talk about people's kids. You don't talk about any of that. That has always stuck with me. What are your kids going to say about that? And I'll be honest with you, when he said it, I thought to myself, what are my kids going to say about this? And I know what my kids are going to say. I know what they're going to say. I know forever that they're going to say that, I stood up for myself and I told the truth and all that stuff. I have nothing to be ashamed of. I have nothing to hide. But I've never forgotten it. And so on this day, I'll raise the same freaking question that he raised about me back in 2016. What are your kids going to say about you? What are your kids going to say about your legacy, about the way you treat fighters, about the way you treat people, about your business practices? What are your kids going to say about that video? What are your kids going to say about the kind of person that you are? What are your kids going to say about you? Ask yourself that fucking question. What are your kids going to say about you? Awards coming up. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in a second.